Hello and welcome to Landsakes Farm Grow With Us campaign. My name is Beth Marshall and I have the pleasure of being the board president for Landsake Farm. What you're going to hear from us for the next 20 to 25 minutes is a brief overview of what we do today at Landsake Farm, our goals to be year-round, and why it is so important that we do this change now. And then you're going to hear a brief description of all of our plans. The presenters today will be Pam Hess, Executive Director of Landsake Farm, Kevin Sullivan, who is the president of Payette, the architect who has worked with us, and Wes Schwartz, who is the one of the other assistant architects at Payette. Next. A couple of key things to remember as you're listening to this presentation is I want you to remember these numbers. The number 0. What you're going to hear today is that our buildings are net zero and everything you're hearing about our plan will cost 0 tax dollars for all of us here in Weston. Nearly 300. This plan took us 3 years and nearly 300 people have stepped up to work with us to hear our plans, to listen to our grant proposals, and all together we were able to put together this plan. The number 40. 40 donors have actually stepped up and have donated $3 million, thanks to Brynja and Hannah Smearson, who are the capital campaign chairs, and they were able to help us get to this point. Our final goal all in is $5 million. So you all have a chance to participate after you hear this presentation today. So with this, I'm going to turn it over to Pam Hess. Next.
Thank you, Beth. What I'd like to do for the next few minutes is talk about Landsake, this place that I know so many of us love and enjoy at the heart of Weston. We've been around for about 41 years, and we started with, in 1970, sort of with Green Power, which was a program for high school students to get them off the streets of Weston and learning to farm. And with that, they donated everything they grew to hunger relief, for those with hunger relief issues. And we're so excited to say that that's still an incredibly core piece to our mission. As a community farm, our goal is to get everyone outside and enjoying the land and get comfortable and kind of helping them take their next steps to their connections to the land in a sustainable way. We are a nonprofit, which means we donate back to our community and beyond, and it's always important for us to maintain that status. Next. We have 3 main pillars of everything that we do. We focus on growing food, growing future leaders, and growing our community. What that means is our food program is about farming in an organic manner, and we sell it at our farm stand. We have CSA members who take a share every year, and about 30% of everything we grow is donated to those with hunger relief issues. Throughout the year, we reach about 5,000 individuals, some multiple times, some once, through our education programs. It might be a few minutes through our open farmyard. It might be for a week-long summer program or working with the schools. We never let the cost of our programs get in the way of everyone participating. We're very lucky to have generous donors who have allowing us to have scholarship programs. And then finally, we grow our community. We are really looking for ways to people engage with each other and the land. And this means our family farm nights, or it might be a maple breakfast in the winter, or it could just be coming out enjoying a small workshop or food on the farm. Next. I want to just take an extra second to talk about our hunger relief efforts, since that's where we started. We work with community partners. Our goal is to grow the food. We know how to do that. And then we work with community partners to make sure that our food is getting into the hands of those who need it most. From here in Weston, working with the Council on Aging, to working with Boston and Waltham and beyond. Next. So you might be wondering, why are we looking at changing what the farm is and looking into the future? Next. As many of you know, we are on town land. And for our first 30-something years, we were working on a 3-year lease. Every 3 years, we had to compete for that lease. And at town meeting in 2015, and then we actually competed for the lease in 2017 and received a long-term lease for 30 years on the land. When we did that for the first time, we've been able to really look into our future of what we can do for this community and beyond. And as we looked at that, we thought about how can we have a little bit less reliance on our neighbors. Many of you may not know that we have no power on the farm, and it takes us 3 hours to open and close our farm stand every day. And we run an extension cord a few hundred yards for the small power we have. Farming is one of those things that is not going to bring in more revenue than it costs, but it's the core to who we are. So we will always do that. So we need to look at how else to bring in revenue, and that is fundraising right now and our education. And we really are looking for ways to engage people so that we can bring them to the farm year round, and that we can reduce that reliance on our neighbors. And finally, as an education organization, we really want to help people understand what we're doing, as well as what they can do in their private lives to really have an impact on the climate resiliency of our community and beyond. Next. So with taking all of those things into mind, we developed a long range plan. We want to operate year round. We want to increase the amount of food we're growing to year round, so that we'll have food at the farm stand, which we plan to have open year round. We want to have kids and adults on the farm learning about their connections to the land year round. We want to do a better job of connecting what we do to people and really do it in a climate resilient way. And we really need to strengthen our model so we're not so reliant on our neighbors, as well as fundraising, which will always be a part of who we are, but it's such a core part. We want to make sure that our business is done in a more sustainable way. Next. So what did we do? We were very lucky to bring in Payette, who's been working with us all these years pro bono, to really develop a plan. First, we said what we want to do, then how we want to do it. So again, we have no utilities on the farm year round. We have no indoor space. So we needed to kind of come up with a plan that would allow us to have the infrastructure to be more successful and to do it in a responsible way. Next. But we didn't do it in a vacuum, as Beth mentioned. We have been looking at how to bring people into our decision making. We worked with community members, board members, advisors, neighbors. We've talked to the town. We've done site walks. We have tried to be really thoughtful as we developed this $5 million campaign. For example, next, when we started this, we looked at the farm and kind of what we had right now. As a farm, it made the most sense to have any kind of infrastructure at the front of the farm. We wouldn't have to run our utilities as far. We wouldn't have as much impact. It'd be closer to the road and to market. But as a community member, it was important for us to look at what was best for everyone, preserving this beautiful view shed, making sure that we didn't change the vista. So as we looked at this, next, we came up with a plan that made sense for us and the community. As you look at this, you'll see that we looked at putting an animal barn in for year-round education with the same animals we have right now. We have no plans to change what animals we have on the farm, but they'll be available for programming year-round. At the back of the farm, we put the operations of Landsake. Our greenhouse and equipment barn will go in the back. So again, to be a good neighbor and a community member. And then at where our current farm stand is, we're going to build a farm stand that will allow us and everyone to enjoy the farm year round. Next. I just want to take a few minutes to talk about our operations, the pieces that are really going to help us behind the scenes, and then I'm going to pass it to Kevin to talk about what's happening at the front of the scenes, kind of what you will see the most as a community member. First, we're putting in a new greenhouse that will allow us to really grow food year round. The propagation house or greenhouse will allow us to grow more seedlings, to grow indoors in this facility year round. Next. And we're also adding a hoop house or a high tunnel. This actually is on rails from the front of the screen to the back of the screen, where we can move this back and forth to really extend our season. The idea being we will have fresh Landsake produce from here or from our root cellar at the farm stand year round. So you'll be able to buy food locally and enjoy Landsake produce and the environment throughout the year. Next. Again, we had no place indoors on the farm, and we're going to put an equipment barn so we can take better care of our equipment, our seeds, and make sure that the land, we're not leaving all of our stuff outside. So what you see when you walk around the farm is more enjoyment of the land versus how we operate. Next. With that, I want to hand it over to Kevin to really talk about the front of the operations that you'll see more. Kevin?
Oh, thank you, Pam. So, hi, I'm Kevin Sullivan. I'm a Weston resident, president of Payette. We're an architecture firm located in Boston. And as Pam mentioned, we've been working pro bono on this project for the last three plus years. So I can't wait to show you some of these images. And in this aerial photo, you're seeing really the impact of the master plan. On the left-hand side is the farm stand, which will be part of phase 2 of our project. On the right-hand side, hidden behind a cluster of trees, is the children's animal barn. The parking lot is going to be enhanced slightly in phase 2. We're going to use grass pavers there, so you won't really see the parking lot unless there are cars parked in it. And in the rear of the site is the service barn, the hoop house, and the greenhouse, which are tucked behind a large cluster of trees. And we've taken great pains actually to take the buildings and push them to the perimeter of the site and cluster them around trees so that you really get this infinite corridor and this view through the center of the site, just as you do now. In the next slide, we're going to see the site plan. And this is really just summarizing what Pam has already shown you. And you see just where the farm stand is relative to the barn in the front, with the pick your own flowers in between. And the service buildings, again, at the rear of the site, out of sight, out of mind, but very important for the workings of the farm. The next slide is going to show you really how the view corridors were considered in siting these buildings. And as you look and drive in off of Newton Street and into the farm, you'll notice there's this infinite view corridor from the front of the farm to the back of the farm. And we really want to maintain that. That was integral in terms of how we sited these buildings. Likewise, as you drive along Newton Street to the south, we were very conscious of these views into the farm as well, and trying to tuck these buildings off to the side, out of these infinite vistas into this wonderful verdant landscape. In the next slide, we look at the coverings, the tree canopy of the farm, and you really get to see how these trees really cradle both the farm stand and the barn to really shelter them from really the sun, but also to make them much, much less apparent in terms of your experience in the landscape. You can really see quite clearly in this view how much the trees are screening the service buildings as well. Now, as we look a little closer at the site plan, we'll see really just how everything works. So you park and enter the site much as you do right now. There are two choices and two paths. So if you're walking to the farm stand, you take the path to your left, right by the pick your own flowers, and enter the farm stand right there. If you were going to the animal barn, you'd walk to the other edge of the parking lot and walk through a grove of trees, and you would approach the barn on that side. And what you'll see surrounding the barn and on paths connecting to two are a lot of different elements of the educational program, such as the children's education garden, the chicken coop, rabbits, and then we're going to have a fenced-in area for the farm animals, particularly goats, that will be grazing and corralled in and around the barn. Now, I wanted to show you a little more detail of how this all works. So looking from the view from the street, a section across the site, this just shows you the relative heights of the buildings. The buildings, the peak of the roof of the barn and both the farm stand are roughly at the elevation of the asphalt roadway at Newton Street. So there's a 20-foot grade change across the site, and then a large cluster of trees that shelter these buildings. So as you look at these trees, you'll notice that we've taken great care that the peaks and the roofs of these buildings do not interrupt do not interrupt with the tree line landscape, with the trees being the dominant characters in the story. They're also sited over 200 feet from the curb line of both Newton and Wellesley Streets. So these buildings are set very far back from the road and are actually more commensurate in scale with the barns on the neighboring properties in terms of the heights of their roofs. Next. This is a view from Newton Street. It's one of the few spots along the way that you can peek into the site and see a glimpse of the barn. And in this next view, you'll see the barn sort of delicately fitting in there. And our intention is for this project is to fit into the larger context of the agrarian landscape, its colors, tones, and vistas. In a sense, we're defining a traditional building using first settlers building methods and a natural palette of materials that weathers with the landscape around it. As we go deeper in the presentation, you'll understand the love that went into these details. Now let's look a little more closely at the farm stand. So this is the view as it exists right now from the parking lot. And if you were approaching the barn, this is what you would see. And in the next slide, we're going to show you the barn fitting into that image. So you can see Newton Street behind it. What you're seeing in this image on the right is a small fenced-in area for the animals, a covered area for the animals to spend time outside. Contrary to what people might think is that animals spend their time in the barn when in fact they actually spend most of their time outside of the barn under this covered porch. We have a touchdown area for some of the summer educational educational programs where the students can put down their backpacks and their lunch and some of their extra coats. So that's sort of a home base for some of those summer activities. And in the next view, you'll see the view looking from the farm back out towards the north. And again, you see in this area, the other end of the campers touchdown area, there's 2 bathrooms there for the educational activities. And again, the fenced in area for the animals. Now the building has a very dynamic personality in that it has the ability to appear both open and closed depending on the elements and the time of day or the season. So in the next slides, I'm going to show you just how the plans work. The plans, it's actually a very small building. The enclosed portion of the building is 20 by 30 feet. That's smaller actually than a typical Weston 3-car garage. Actually, the peak of the roof is lower than a 3-car garage. And in this plan view, you'll see both the animal shelter on the left, the camper touchdown area, the toilets, and some of the storage areas. And in the image, you can just see how these different zones of the building are both enclosed and open. So in a sense, the building functions almost like a pavilion, sort of that acts as a community element, bringing some of these very necessary needs for the farm under cover, but also providing an amenity for people that are involved in some of the educational programs. Next. With this last image, Wes is going to decide some of the really interesting details of the barn. And what I wanted to leave you with this image is we wanted to design a barn that fulfills all the needs of a barn, such as the storage and places for animals, but also provide a wonderful light-filled place for children to bond and learn about animals, a welcoming place to gather while also broadening our relationship with Landscape Farms' verdant landscape. So Wes?
Thanks, Kevin. I'm Wes Schwartz. I'm an associate principal at Payette, and Kevin and I have really been working on this together for the last 3 years. So what I wanted to talk about is a little bit about sort of materiality and construction, and sort of go a little more in depth on what Kevin was describing when he talks about fitting in and using traditional techniques. So first of all, when Kevin describes sort of first settler building techniques, I think what we're talking about is sort of traditional timber framing. And so that is, as you can see on the image on the left, thinking about working directly with green lumber that's freshly cut and milled, and then using traditional techniques to kind of mortise and tenon and fit together the beams. And really the whole thing goes together with no nails. It's really just hardwood pegs that nail together the frame. And as these frames dry, they sort of stretch into tension and really become very resilient, strong structures. When we talk about the sort of cladding of the barn, we're looking at, again, naturally cut pine that's rough sawn pine that, you can see on the top image has a very light color when it's new, but as it sits and weathers on the site, it starts to pick up on all these gray and weathered tones that really start to pick up on the color tones of, say, the bark of the trees around the site, and really kind of settles in and becomes a part of the landscape. And then when we look at the roof, this is where we take a slight departure, and it becomes a bit more of an agrarian language, where we think of it as a bit more utilitarian, where we're building this beautiful barn structure and we want to protect it with the most durable roof we can. So we're looking at galvalume roofing that is sort of this natural metal color that is a highly durable roof that will last a very long time with no maintenance. The interesting thing about this is it starts to pick up actually the colors of the sky and becomes very atmospheric on the site. So to talk a little bit more about the timber framing, the timber frame will be built kind of off-site and then brought in as sort of pieces. And when you build a timber frame, it's built in what's called bents. And so as you're looking at this image of the interior of the barn, sort of these major elements that you're seeing would be prefabricated laying on the ground. And then there would be a sort of community barn raising where over the course of really a day or 2 days, these pieces get lifted into place, and you then have your barn structure, and you start to infill the pieces between it and clad the structure. But it's a sort of fun community event that happens very quickly over just the course of a few days after all this material gets kind of pre-assembled on the ground. And then moving outside of the barn itself, we've been looking carefully at kind of the site around the barn. We are siting the barn as well as the farm stand to avoid any of the existing trees. There's many valuable specimen trees on the site, and we want to be sensitive not only to the trees, but the ecology of the whole site. And so as we look at the barn will have an effect on the site, we need to do excavation, but we're looking at ways to kind of minimize the impact of that and actually go a step further to think about how we can create small little educational, ecological environments around it, whether it's rain gardens that collect rainwater, that can become spaces where you might find frogs, or little areas where you might see pollinators, or areas for bird houses, and really think about how to enhance the educational opportunities within the landscape that's there, and really kind of enhance that and build that into the plan as we move ahead. And as we think about how to build those landscapes, we think about using the materials that are already on the site. So we can use stones that are found to create benches. We can use earth that's excavated from the foundation to create mounds and other little landscapes. And just think about ways to bring the ecology into the site and enhance the educational opportunities. So with that, I'll pass it back to Kevin to talk in more detail about the farm stand.
So we wanted to share some of the design images of the farm stand. And before I do that, I think it's important to sort of ground us in the realities of what the existing farm stand is. There's the front of the house activities that you see where the goods are stored and not stored, but presented, and where you purchase everything. It's a fairly social place. And then there's the back of the house where really a lot of work happens, where they're bringing in the vegetables and produce and processing them, washing them, packaging them up again for sale. So our design is really considering all these activities that are happening under shelter here and rethinking how those go. So in the next image, we're returning to the aerial photograph and we're looking at the farm stand on the left. And essentially the farm stand sits nestled where it is right now. It's 50% farm stand and 50% processing and storage. So I wanted to keep that keep that in mind. And we, much like the barn, it functions as a pavilion during the summer months with an umbilical connection to the landscape all around it. It's very open. And then in the winter, it closes up and becomes much more of a contained interior environment. In the next image, you'll get a sense for the site plan. So this is really just showing you where it's located, which it's located right where it is now. And in the next slide, I wanted to show you what this would look like if you were standing from Wellesley Street, looking back towards the farm stand. So you see where those existing trees are now. And in this next image, we're going to drop in the farm stand. And you can see we're modulating the scale of the building with several different roof lines here. The main central space, which is the central farm stand, is the larger volume of space. There's a porch that's exterior, that's facing the parking lot, and a large open window that would let you in and see this wonderful lattice work of the wood structure on the interior. In the next slide, we're going to show you sort of this image of the interior, which is this central space, which is for the retail activities in the farm stand. And you can see in the windows here, they're open. It's summertime, very lovely space that's open to the exterior environment. In addition to the food processing areas, we are providing sort of a very small cafe that's on the right-hand side in the back. So you could get coffee or ice cream or home-baked goods. There is a demonstration kitchen that is part of it as well, and that's on the back right-hand side of this slide. And that would be part of the education program, but so that you could learn and hold classes on how to cook with the produce. So this space could be used in a multitude of different ways. Now, let me show you the plan in a little more detail. And this really shows you the sort of the front half of the plan. At the bottom, that's the farm stand activities. That's more for selling of goods. And then the top half of the plan is all for storage and processing of the goods. So, so the processing zone that we have at the top, that's for washing the produce. That produce then moves into the farm stand for retail or out to the CSA station, which is immediately adjacent to it. We do imagine under this covered porch that's facing the pick your own flowers in the parking lot, that there would be additional zones for people to sit or even outdoor stations for the farm stand. On the inside, you can see the zone for the cafe, the cash register zone, the kitchen, and the farm stand proper. We would expect that there would be some nice seating zones in and around the farm stand, just for people who are visiting to have a nice chat or to enjoy their coffee and such. There will be a small loft area above the processing zone for staff not offices, but a work area, as well as additional storage area. In the basement, there would be a root cellar to house vegetables permanently off season. Next. This is a view of the farm stand looking from the parking lot. So this would be the approach to it. So you'll see a big part of this is really the profile of the roof and how that works with the line of the treescape, but also shelters and shades that south-facing porch and provides a wonderful aperture looking back towards the educational buildings on the other side of Wellesley Street. Next. Now Wes is going to talk about some of the sustainable goals for the project. It's pretty exciting because this ensemble of building is going to be a net zero project. And he's going to tell you how we do this.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. So when we look at sustainability, our firm is really dedicated to this, and we take it very seriously. And so as we look at this, we look at this sort of inverted triangle where sort of the net zero goal is on the bottom, but really it takes a lot of effort to get there. And what I want to say is that really we try to harness free resources and use what's already there as much as possible. So we're minimizing the impact before we're then, say, offsetting the energy usage of the building to get to, say, net zero. So I think our goal is to get to net zero, and our goal to do that is to minimize how much energy is used on site and build as responsibly as possible. As we look at what we could do and our kind of goals for the project, and specifically the farm stand, we're looking at sort of two specific programs. One is the Living Building Certification, which really goes above and beyond what we would typically think about sustainability, and starts to create programs for education and equity, and really goes beyond and is more of a regenerative program. So not only are we not doing any harm, we're actually improving what is there. And then additionally, we're looking at Passive House, which is a program that helps you design to really minimize those loads. So really Passive House goes hand in hand with net zero to really help you design in ways that reduce energy as the first premise, and then offsetting that energy that's left over as sort of the secondary effect. And the effect of net zero not only creates a more sustainable building, but will help Landsake be a more sustainable organization, because it will have the secondary effect of really minimizing their ongoing costs by balancing their ongoing operational costs with their usage. With that, I think we're going to wrap up, and I'll pass it back to Beth to wrap up.
So what this slide talks a little bit about is just what our next steps are. And it's really up to you. We've spent 3 years really working with so many people in the town of Weston. And again, I want to remind you, this project is no tax dollars. It's all privately funded. It's 100% net zero. And it's going to allow us, as you just heard Wes describe, it's going to really allow us to increase operational efficiencies and enable us to have a showcase for sustainability right here in Weston. So I invite all of you to get involved. And I know the first question is how. We've had people comment that they want to have fundraising parties. They want to come and help us with events. We want to engage the entire community on this next step. We still have $2 million more to go, and we know that the town of Weston is behind us. So if you'd like to even email the select board to let them know that how much you love the project, please, we invite you to do that. Or email any questions, comments, or the fact that you'd like to join us to community@landsake.org. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, and we're looking forward to hearing your comments and having you work with us. Thank you so much.